Imhaveva Gautama Bharadvaja Vayameva Gautamo Ayam Bharadvaja Imhaveva Vishwamitra Jamadagni Ayameva Vishwamitro Ayam Jamadagni Imhaveva Vasishta Kashyapa Vayameva Vasishto Ayam Kashyapo Bhage Vatrirvacha Hyannamadhyatet Iha vai namai tadyatririti Sarvasyata bhavati sarvamastyanam bhavati ya evam vedam iti dvitiyam brahmanam. Namaskaram. What I just read for you is the brihad-āranyaka Upanishad 224. It's from the Śukla Yajur-védā, and the reason why I read it out for you is it's one of the very first categorization of the saptarśīs, or the 7 great seers who see and who perceive reality as it is. And why am I in particular bringing it up today? Today is the day right after Ganesha Chaturthi, and every year the day immediately after Ganesha Chaturthi is called as Rishi Panchami. Ganesha comes, removes all the obstacles in the form of our own troubleshooting capabilities and perceptive leadership capabilities as Ganesha and Vighna-vinayaka, thus getting rid of all the obstacles, few of which are external but most of which are internal. But then we utilize this opportunity of having cleared up the obstacles to start seeing things as they are, and that's where the Maharishis come into picture. There are many Maharishis, especially the land of Bharatvarsha has been blessed with Maharishis of various hues and cries at almost every moment in history, if you take, including right now. But the most celebrated of these are the Vedic seers, of whom the saptarśīs are mentioned in the Vedas itself. Though the Samhitas, which is the very first part of all the 4 Vedas, Rig, Yajur, Sama, Atharvana, do not have any reference to the saptarśīs. When you go to the second stage, that is the Brahmanas, you do find reference to the saptarśīs. In the Aranyakas, of which brihadāranyaka Upanishad is both an Aranyaka as well as an Upanishad, that is the Vedanta, the 4th part of all Vedas. And then you see that brihadāranyaka, brihad means huge, it's like humongous, and it's indeed one of the longest of the Upanishads. And in this, in the 2nd chapter, 2nd section, 4th verse, is all that I read for you, because this brings out the names of the 7 rishis, saptarśīs, which are mentioned slightly differently in other places, even within the Vedas and the post-Vedic literature as well. But what is more important for us is the intimacy of this, because as you already saw, I was pointing out to various sense organs, and it is said that this year is Gautama and this year is Bharadvaja. Similarly, in the same sentence, they go on to say that this eye is Vishwamitra and this eye is Jamadagni. And similarly, they go further to say that the nostrils are Vasishta and Kashyapa. So this nostril is Vasishta and this nostril is Kashyapa. And then the tongue, which is both an organ of sense and an organ of action, organ of sense for taste and organ of action for speaking or oral communication, and that is Atri Maharishi. And so all the 7 rishis are covered into this bowl or patra called the head of a human body, and every one of us has all of these as organs of perception. And these organs of perception usually are outbound, as we discussed in the very first episode of kids, first or second episode of kids, but we need to use the reverse gear, as we saw in the third episode probably, to do what is known as a Pratyahara, which is the fifth of the limbs of Maharishi Patanjali's Ashtanga Yoga, or the eight-limbed yoga. After what we already saw as the regulations and rules, yama and niyama, the yama, of course, having things like ahimsa, satya, brahmacharya, asteya, and aparigraha, or not hoarding, so non-stealing. And so essentially what you're talking about is some form of external and internal ways of disciplining ourselves to be able to achieve greater things. So this is no way is a restriction on us, this is no way is a commandment to us, but essentially a secret to go even further in our freedom and liberation. So that's essentially what the yamas and niyamas were. Asana, we saw stiram sukham, that which is stable and comfortable. Then we saw pranayama, of which we just did a simple example with the muladhara meditation combined with it, of deep breathing. We will get into other pranayamas later on. I just want to give a little more coverage to Pratyahara today, because that is essentially these outbound sense organs, turning them inwards, and that's essentially what this means. And no better day than today, on the occasion, special occasion of Rishi Panchami. 3 years ago we conducted the Rishi Homa at home. It's a very rare Homa which is done honoring all the saptarshīs, as well as Mother Arundhati, the Guru Mata associated with Vasishtha Rishi. And these saptarshīs are also depicted astronomically as the stars in the Big Dipper. As you see, there are 7 stars with one light star, which is Arundhati. And you would have seen in many Indian wedding ceremonies also, the bridegroom points to the bride, the Arundhati Nakshatra, and even if it's daytime, the bride just says, yes, she saw it. But essentially, there's a lot of deep scientific and spiritual knowledge and wisdom rather built into all of these things. But the names given in an astronomical sense slightly vary from this list of saptarshīs. But because we are into an Advaitic Vedantic perspective, the Upanishads are our ultimate, and therefore I tend to trust the Upanishad, of which we encountered the Śukla Yajur-védas, which of course is associated with Yajña-valkyā, who vomited his guru's teachings, and the other students of that guru essentially swallowed it, and the Krishna Yajur-védā came out of the other students as sparrows. Whereas what we are talking about is the original Śukla Yajur-védā of Yajña-valkyā, and that is where the brihad-āranyaka Upanishad, one of the largest Upanishads, which also finds its place in the 10 principal Upanishads. Muktika Upanishad, which is one of the Upanishads, conversation between Rama and Hanuman, where Rama tells Hanuman about 108 Upanishads that are there. Upa means to be near, ni means below, and shad means to sit. So sitting near and below the guru, one hears the wisdom, then reflects upon it, shravana manana, and then nitidhyasana brings it to practice. So what is most important today is this particular stanza of the brihad-āranyaka Upanishad, where it's told that 2 of the saptarshīs are our ears, 2 of the saptarshīs are our eyes, 2 of the saptarshīs are our nostrils, and 1 of the saptarshīs our tongue, in the form of the sense organ of taste rather than the organ of speech. But later on we would see that Atri has even more powers, going beyond sensing to action as well simultaneously. So these are multifunctional kind of sensors, which are both sensors and actuators in a co-located sense, like piezoelectrics, for example. So what we are essentially talking about is the fact that in Pratyahara, the fifth limb of Patanjali Maharishi, we are going to turn all of these sense organs. The skin or touch was interestingly missing in this, and we will see why a little later. Not in today's episode, but in one of the future episodes of kids. But right now, this is being a kindergarten, is a garden for kids. It's not a school for kids, not a university for all you adults, but here it is a garden that we all become children and play in the sense of learning with play and playing with learning. So playing and learning are not distinct for us. Every play, life itself is a play. Every life, every play, we are learning new things and putting it into practice, and each learning is in itself a play. So that's the wonderful kindergarten that we are in. And what is this kindergarten for? To intimately discover ourself. So intimately discover self, so Kids. And this intimacy is already seen in this very shloka, where the saptarshīs, who we thought were far away in a different galaxy, where we see that Big Dipper and think, yes, that is also true, but even more intimately for our own purposes of sadhana, they are right here. Two of the rishis are our ears. Who are they? Gautama and Bharadwaja. Two of the rishis are our eyes. Who are they? Vishwamitra and Jamadagni. And two of the saptarshīs are our nostrils, and they are Vasishtha and Kashyapa. And then the tongue is Atri Maharishi. But I would like to take it a little further, and because we have been doing the Kundalini yoga practices as well, bringing it in a very, very let's say nascent form, without any dangers associated with deeper versions of Kundalini. I am just introducing you to the very, very basic aspects without going into the details. Which is something can be done without any risk whatsoever. So you don't need to be worried. Many people say Kundalini has its side effects, risks and things like that. But the way I am introducing it to you, I am just chopping off all those risks and giving you the very basic aspects which can be done risk-free. And trust me with that, because not only have I done it, and I have imbibed this into quite a few people, and all of who have been relishing it without any harmful effects whatsoever. So while Pratyahara is talking about the general tendency of this sense organs to go outwards, reversing their direction, bringing them inwards to recognize who we are, the self, the Atma, the Brahman. Very interestingly, it's the brihad-āranyaka Upanishad which brings out the Mahavakya of the Yajur-védā. Every Veda, Rig Veda, let's say Samaveda, Yajur-védā, and Atharvana Veda and Yajur-védā, all of them have their own Mahavakyas, the Prajnanam Brahma, Tattvamasi, Ayam Atma Brahma, and Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman, I am God. We recognize that we are the ones who created God through our earlier evolutionary forms as these saptarshīs. So it's not that God created man as we see in other religions. We are in Sanatana Dharma, we recognize the fact that it is we who create the gods, and in turn we let the gods as a game, as a play, create us. And what better way to recognize that than during the Ganesha Chaturthi, where we create him out of the Panchabhutas again. We use clay, which has not only earth content but also water content, and then we bake it. So essentially it has the fire content, and of course there are pores in it which contain air, which is the fourth element, and of course it occupies certain space and takes certain time to create, to sustain, and to dissolve back again, and therefore it has the fifth Panchabhuta of Akasha or Kala, and essentially all five bhutas are in it, just like in us. So it's just symbolic of us And so we create Ganesha. Ganesha doesn't create us. We create Ganesha in play and dissolve him in play, just like how we create and dissolve this body and recreate another one for our next lifetime. So in this sense, apart from the fact that you can use this stanza as a Pratyahara, where you can see that though most of the time these eyes are actually going outwards, there is a possibility when you recognize these eyes as two of the saptarshis that they can actually go inward, in which case they become intuitive, they join together and become the third eye. Similarly, the third ear is what you get when these two rishis combine to get an internal audition. And then similarly, of course, then two nostrils turning inwards to smell what is inside of us. Of course, not the flesh and the blood and all that which will stink, but we are talking about, when we say internal, we are talking about the subtle body, which is not made out of these panchabhutas, and therefore really doesn't have the same kinds of opposite smells, opposite tastes, opposite sounds and opposite sights as the external sense objects do. Their characteristics always possess opposites, whereas the inner nature is to have a singular nature, and that's essentially what Pratyahara is all about, to turning all your externally bound sense organs away from the sense objects, bringing them back to who you really are, or at the most as life. In which case also you see the universality of yourself, all embracing inclusivity, which is what one of the yamas is also all about. Brahmacharya, most people think is just celibacy, but celibacy is just one small aspect of brahmacharya. Brahmacharya is charya as Brahman, that is essentially your very behavior and your actions and your way of getting inputs and giving outputs, all like Brahman, because we are Brahman. So that's what brahmacharya really means, and that's essentially all inclusivity, because once you have all inclusivity, there's no other. So who would you have sex with, or who would you have any kind of relationship with? So celibacy is obvious, right? So celibacy is an obvious outcome of this. Celibacy is not brahmacharya. Celibacy is one of the many outcomes of brahmacharya, because you are in an all-inclusive embrace, then you have included everybody in you, and therefore there's no room for not being celibate. So that's essentially one of the yamas we saw. Now let's get into deep meditation associated with the Rishi Panchami, in which case I would like to also talk to you about the association not only of the saptarshis with the sense organs, but also with our chakras. So for the first, as I said, apart from the 7 chakras in the body, we have the Matru-Pitru Chakra a few inches above the Sahasrara, and we also have the Guru Gayatri Chakra as the ultimate. So 7 within the body. In fact, Sahasrara is also kind of an interface within and out. So Sahasrara, the Matru-Pitru and the Guru Gayatri Chakra, these constitute a triad. Similarly, that triad is essentially the out-of-body kind of experiences, or a Triguna-tita. You go beyond all the 3 gunas of Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. Whereas these 3, so Agnya, the Vishuddhi and the Anahata, are associated with Sattvic gunas. They are associated with goddesses, Parvati, Saraswati and Lakshmi, and of course their spouses. But essentially these are goddesses of Sattvic nature. And then when we go further down to the Manipura Chakra of Ayyappa, the Swadishthana Chakra of Muruga, Saravana Bhava, Kartikeya, Guruguha, and the Muladhara Chakra of Ganesha, Ekadanta, Vighna-Vinayaka. All these three are sons of Shiva and male gods, and of course they have their own spouses. In all cases, some people think of Ganesha and Ayyappa as brahmacharis, but we are talking of spouses in the sense of powers, and all of them have their powers. So in the case of Ganesha, it's Siddhi, Buddhi, Riddhi, and in the case of Ayyappa, it's Mallika, Puratamman, Swaha, Swadha, Dharma Devadai, Mohini, etc. So all these are powers. Mohini is the mother of Ayyappa in his form as Manikanta when he was found. Vishnu's avatar as Mohini, along with Shiva, gives rise to Manikanta, who goes on to become Swami Sharanam Ayyappa. Now, coming back to the Rishi Panchami, you saw that below the Muladhara is the tamasic gunas or ashuras, and above the Muladhara, including the Muladhara, the first three, Muladhara, Swadhisthana, Manipura, are the Rajasic guna, and these two are nothing but depicted in our Pauranic literature. The tamasic gunas are depicted as ashuras. You would not find this interpretation anywhere. These are interpretations that I get through my meditation. So I tend to trust my own experiences, which are evolving far more than anything that I hear or read, because there's no point in getting worked up over things that you don't experience. So it's important for us to experience what it is, and I experience all the ashuras as my own tamasic gunas, which I have to a large extent eliminated, and the devas as the rajasic gunas. And you know that both the devas and the ashuras were born to the same father, Kashyapa Maharishi, who is at the Muladhara Chakra. So now we will associate each of the saptarshis with one of the chakras, and Kashyapa Maharishi happens to be at the Muladhara Chakra. What does it mean, Kashyapa Maharishi at the Muladhara Chakra? It just means that when we act out of our Muladhara Chakra, then we can see all that Kashyapa Maharishi could see so many thousands of years back. That kind of perception, the deep perception, especially of the interiority and therefore of everything external as well. They are the best of scientists that you could have ever had, and you would probably ever have. So that kind of science of Kashyapa Maharishi, he fathers both the Ashuras as well as the Devas. He fathers the Ashuras, or what I call as my own tamasic gunas, through a spouse called Diti, which essentially means duality. So when we start seeing things as distinct pairs of opposite, then we are essentially operating out of our power of Diti or duality, and therefore tamasic gunas are born out of it. In other words, out of Kashyapa and Diti, the Ashuras were born. So it's same like saying that when I see what Kashyapa sees, then if I utilize my power of duality, then I give rise to my tamasic gunas, which are not at all, not always inessential. For going to sleep, for example, especially those suffering from insomnia, can actually take advantage of these ashuras or tamasic gunas, because it is in deep tamas that you essentially get into your deep sleep, where there is no awareness, only relaxation, relaxation, relaxation alone. So we do get into these. It's only during the waking state that we need to have this awareness. But yes, going beyond certain stage, we'll talk about it later on, Trigunatita, we can get an awareness into our deep sleep as well. It might sound scary for those who are suffering from insomnia, so we will not talk about that so early on. Let's all evolve to a certain extent, then I'll talk to you about it. But right now, trust me that tamasic gunas are useful, especially for us to go to sleep. And therefore, Diti has her own place, and duality has its own place. To see things as distinct, to see things in their opposing manner, as pleasure, pain, hot, cold, happiness, sadness, etc. Now, when Kashyapa Maharishi gets in union with at the Muladhara Chakra, which is at the base of our spine, between the genitals and the anus, at that location in the subtle body, not the physical body, then we already saw for the first three chakras, we will use the Chin Mudra or the Jnana Mudra. For the next three chakras, which are sattvic in nature and goddesses, as I told you, we will use the Chinmaya Mudra. And for the three top ones, that is the Sahasrara, Matrupitru and the Guru Gayatri chakras, we will use the Adi Mudra, all of which I've talked to you about in a previous episode. So you can go back to those episodes if you are not familiar with these things, who have just directly come to this particular episode or happen to miss those last two episodes. Now, once that is done, see, these 9 chakras, 7 in the body and let's say 6 in the body and 3 in the outside the body, including the Sahasrara, we are dividing them into 3 sets of 3 each, triads as I call them. The first 3 are associated with Rajasic gunas, Ganesha, Muruga and Ayyappa. Then the next 3 are associated with the Sattvic gunas, the goddesses Lakshmi, Saraswati and Parvati. And then the next 3 are associated with Shiva, the ancestors, which include of course the saptarśīs, because all of you would be familiar with the gōtra in the Indian tradition, especially the Sanatana Dharma tradition, where we talk about what is our gōtra, which essentially means what is our family lineage, and all of these trace back to the saptarśīs. So I, for example, am from the Vishwamitra gōtra or the Kaushiki gōtra of Vishwamitra himself. And similarly, we all have a certain lineage from which we come from those saptarśīs, and depending on that, those characteristics are inbuilt within our genetic build-up. So our genes have those characteristics. So if you know your gōtra, well and good. If you don't, it doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. We can see through all of these rishis by operating at various chakras. But if you do know, then it's good, at least in the beginning stages, to focus on that particular chakra which is associated with your gōtra's guru or saptarshi, one of the saptarshis, and I will tell you, of course, every chakra which is the rishi, who is the rishi who is associated with it, and what is the kind of perception that is there associated with that. How do we see? But one commonality between all these saptarshis, and we will talk about 2 more rishis, namely Agastya and Patanjali. Agastya for the Matrupitru Chakra and Patanjali for the Guru Gayatri Chakra, who are not in the list of 7 rishis, but they are great rishis by themselves, Maharishis by themselves. And so we'll talk about a set of 9 rishis associated with the 3 Rajasic gunas, the 3 Sattvic gunas, and the 3 Trigunatita stages. That is where you have transcended all the 3 gunas. And no rishis are associated with the lower chakras. There's lower 7 chakras, and it's these lower 7 plus the upper 7 within the body which are essentially talked about the Iredu Ulagam, 2 into 7, 14 planes of existence, or many people wrongly translate it as 14 worlds and think of these as actual spatial locations far away from Earth, and think of imagine going there and having a better life there, having destroyed the awesome planet that we have through the kind of pollution that we have created, and now we are thinking of going somewhere else and destroying some other planets as well, whether you call it Vaikunta or whatever. Please stop this joke on yourself and on others, and let's evolve right here and now. This is heaven. If you want, this can be hell also, depending upon if you live out of your lower 7 chakras, mostly in tamasic gunas, which are useful for deep sleep but not in the waking state, not even in the dream state to a great extent, if you want to avoid the kind of dreams like nightmares, etc. Now, coming back, so we have these 3 triads, and each one of these triads, be it Rajas, Sattva and the Trigunatita stage, where we have transcended all the three gunas. We don't even have sattvic guna because most of us are operating out of rajasic gunas. We keep telling become sattvic, become sattvic, become sattvic. But it's like saying for a person who's in let's say 10th or 12th grade that college is awesome, next is college, next is college. But once you go into college only, you see that that is another kind of school, and you have to get through that degree 4 years or 5 years or 3 years, whatever it is, and then you have to go beyond that. So that's the stage where you have crossed all formal education, and that's essentially what you're talking about as the Triguna-atita stage in a spiritual ladder that we have, going from the lower truths to the higher truths. Lower in only in the sense of they being building blocks, like Lego building blocks. We all at least the recent generations would have played with these building blocks from Lego and many other companies which imitate Lego, and you see that the building blocks are the same set, but so many different beautiful and even functional creations can be achieved out of that just through our imagination, which is the Rahu Tattva. So many people think of Rahu as bad, Rahu Kalam as bad. No, it's a question of how you put that to use. Rahu and Rahu Kalam can be very beneficial if you can make your imagination constructive and utilitarian, not only for yourself but those around you in the society. So it's absolutely no time, including your Ashtama Shani or the Yajur-védā Shani, or which is essentially Swadishthana as they call it, the Ketu period or a Rahu period or a Shani period. None of these are bad periods. Just a question of what you use it for. If you use it for the wrong purposes, obviously it's going to be a bad period for you. So recognize the strengths and capabilities of each one of these. They are awesome in their own way. For example, when the season is ripe for sowing rice, if you go ahead and sow some other grain which is not conducive for that, let's say olives or something like that, neither the ground nor the season is conducive for it, then obviously you're going to have a very bad crop, and you're going to cry, and farmer suicides and other things, very bad situations result out of that, only because your perception was wrong. It was a season to sow rice, instead you sowed some other grain. So recognize each period, whether it is what dasha bhukti you're going through, or what day or tithi or yoga or karana that it is. Any one of the panchanga aspects, be it the vara, the tithi, or the let's say yoga, karana, etc., nakshatra, you can take the benefits of that and utilize it in the best possible way. It's a question of all these being tools, all these being opportunities, if only you look at them as opportunities. Else everything can be an obstacle. Every period, even the so-called shukra dasha, etc., the so-called good periods can become bad if you're misusing that also. So please never ever say this is my bad time or good time, nothing like that. There are no dualities over there. That's when you're operating from Diti, the one of the wives of Kashyapa. The other wife is Aditi, out of whom the Rajasic gunas are suras, namely the devas are born. Indra, Agni, Yama, Niruti, etc. Yama, of course, is Surya Putra and is a grandson to Kashyapa in that sense. So is Shanaicharya. So what we are talking about essentially is that, of course, Kashyapa has many wives. It's not just Diti and Aditi, who are the polarities of duality and non-duality. That is, that Aditi essentially is our ability to see things as one through an all-inclusive embrace of Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas, Sabka Prayas, and that's what the Devas is. But too much action creates that Rajasic passion, which beyond a point needs to be curtailed, and then you go into the Sattvic gunas. So there are some Sattvic sons of Kashyapa Maharishi as well. For example, one of his many wives, Vinata, gave birth to Garuda, who is essentially at the Anahata Chakra, and his flapping of the wings is what gives rise to the Vedic chants. And that's exactly a way to say that depending upon how that perception is put into action. Kashyapa is the same one perception at the Muladhara Chakra, which is acting through various abilities. One is through the Diti ability of duality, giving rise to asuras or our tamasic gunas, through our non-dual powers, capabilities, Aditi, that is giving rise to the rajasic gunas, or through our sattvic attributes like Vinata, as an example, giving rise to the Nagas of great perception like Ketu, Vasuki, and Adi Anantasesha, whose avatar is Patanjali Maharishi, Adi Anantasesha, on whom Ananta Padmanabha Swami lies down. And therefore Vasandima will be singing in our next episode Vasudeva Yani, honoring the Tiruvananthapuram Ananta Padmanabha Swami, which is Shantakaram, Bhujaga Shainam. That Bhujaga is essentially a snake, and Shiva has Vasuki around his neck as well. Now this Adi Anantasesha once was confused because Vishnu, even in his yoga nidra, was laughing and enjoying and shaking his body thoroughly. And then Adi Anantasesha wanted to know what it is. During yoga nidra, he is usually so still, and stillness never has a beginning or end, and like motion. So when Adi Anantasesha asked for that, then Mahavishnu told him, well, I'm watching the dance of Nataraja in Chidambaram. There's no joy greater than that. And you know the other story where Shiva came to watch the dance of Krishna with the gopis, what is called as the Ras Leela, the Garba, and the dance at the banks of Yamuna in Vrindavan. And so you see that our own everythingness and our own nothingness exchange these pleasantries. So similarly, our own everythingness told Adi Anantasesha, which is nothing but Adi first, Ananta infinite, and Sesha remainder or zero. 0, 1, infinity, the oneness of all these three. 1 divided by 0 tends to infinity in the limit. Similarly, 1 divided by infinity tends to 0 in the limit, and infinity into 0 in the limit tends to unity. And that's essentially what this principle of Adi Anantasesha is. So Mahavishnu told, well, I'm enjoying the dance of nothingness, that is Nataraja at Chidambaram, that is Chit Ambaram, that is the space of our consciousness. Ambaram is space or Akasha, and Chit is our consciousness, the greater form of our mind. So when Manas goes beyond Ahamkara and Buddhi, then it becomes in the fourth level consciousness or blissful nature, and that's essentially Chit. Out of which, of course, we say Chidananda Maharaj, which means that it's in their own consciousness they are blissful. Then we call the person as Chidananda. And Maharaj, of course, means a great king, because they have conquered themselves. A great king is not like Napoleon Bonaparte or Hitler or anybody who goes out and conquers things, even Ashoka the Great, even though we call him the Great. But the real greatness is in conquering your own interiority, which is the greatest obstacle in your progress, your likes and dislikes, because of which you do not have any freedom. You become a slave of your mind, a slave of your body, a slave of your sense organs. Please get rid of this slavery. We keep thinking that is freedom, because just I'll do what I like, I don't do what I don't like. Who are you? You are not the mind, I say. And it's the mind which has likes and dislikes, and the mind is your tool. It has to listen to you, not you listening to it. That is at most slavery to a tool. At least if you want to be a slave to something more prominent, not to sense organs, body or mind. So grow over that, and grow over your tamasic gunas, grow over your rajasic gunas. In other words, grow over your inertia and lethargy, grow over your passions and aggressive nature because of those passions, and get into the purity of sattva. Eventually we have to transcend the sattva as well. We have to transcend purity as well, and go beyond to the Trigunatita stages of the Sahasrara, the Matru Pitru Chakra and the Guru Gayatri Chakra. And all of these have the rishis associated with them. I've already talked about Kashyapa Maharishi and his spouses, or our own powers of duality, non-duality, and Vinata, and many other powers at the Muladhara. Then when we act out of that perception and those powers, we create really amazing things for ourselves and for the rest of mankind and other living beings as well, not only on this planet but the entire universe. Then we come a little up to the Swadishthana Chakra. That's the chakra of Atri Maharishi, another great saint whose ashram in the Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh border we had the opportunity to visit. It's a wonderful place near Chitrakoot, which also figures in the Ramayana, as you know. And Atri Maharishi is, of course, the husband of one of the greatest pativratas ever, Anusuya. Anusuya is the lack of jealousy. Neither can anybody else be jealous about her, nor can she be jealous about anybody else. They're absolutely getting rid of jealousy both directions. That Anusuya is tested for her pativrata or her fidelity to her husband through the three Shaktis of Lakshmi, Saraswati and Parvati, who are at the higher chakras of sattvic nature. They're thinking, what is this Rajasic lady over here doing? How can she be called a better pativrata than ourselves? And then it is showcased, they test by sending their spouses, namely Narayana, Brahma and Shiva, as mendicants to the ashram of Atri Maharishi when Atri Maharishi was outside for his penance. And Anusuya came out when these three men came and asked for Bhavati Bhiksham Dehi. And when they asked for the Bhiksha, she went as usual. Whenever big bhikshus come, they give whatever they have, even if they don't have anything more for themselves to eat. First, it has to be shared with the others, especially the mendicants who are great seers themselves. So when she came out, the bhikshus didn't accept it, because according to their tradition, they said, these are of course Shiva, Brahma and Vishnu, they said that they cannot accept these offerings from her, because they only take offerings from those who are unclothed, who are in their true nature. And which means the person giving the dhana has to be unclothed. Of course, if Atri Maharishi was there, he would have probably removed his clothes and gone and given it. But Anusuya, her feminine nature does not permit it, and she's also said to be a pativrata who shows her physical body only to her husband, and therefore she is in a kind of a dilemma, but it lasts only for a few moments. Immediately what she does is she uses her own powers of pativrata to convert these three into infants, and these three men into infants, and just embraces them, and they get conjoined into a single body with three heads, and which is Dattatreya, with the heads of Shiva, Vishnu and Brahma, with dogs as his vehicle or vahana, and who later on went to become one of the greatest rishis ever, because he is the son of Atri Maharishi, is called Dattatreya. And then of course she took this child inside, unclothed herself, and according to their tradition, she fed her breast milk to these kids in her nude state. But that's essentially talking about the capabilities that we have in terms of Atri kind of a perception, Anusuya kind of a power which is associated with it, which is the lack of jealousy. You are not at all comparing with others. Oh, that person is so rich, I want to be richer than him. That person has let's say a Ferrari, I want to have a Lamborghini or a Maserati car. That person has a penthouse or one of the best apartments, I would want to have one of the best villas. Oh, that person has a master's degree, I would like to have a PhD degree. Oh, that person has has a PhD degree in an ordinary college. I want to have it in an Ivy League or one of the top ranked universities. Okay, that person has it in a top ranked university, but he has it in a branch which is of not much significance. I will have it in a most required or sought after branch. So these kinds of comparisons with people, oh, that person is so strong, he has such an awesome body, six pack and things like that. Oh, I want to exercise, get that. Well, it's okay to be motivated by those things if it works properly for you, but jealousy should never come into the picture. Either you becoming jealous of somebody else, or you showing off your things in such a manner that others become jealous of you. You neither become a cause for jealousy, nor of course you don't have much control over that. It's their internal thing, but at least there's no need to display wealth as much as it is not necessary to display poverty, especially when you were not even poor. There are many people so-called Gandhian in nature who just want to show off that they are very simple, and they will have huge bank balances, but they will be wearing torn clothes and chappals, Hawaii chappals, even in places where it's not allowed, and just showing off their poverty, riding scooters and two-wheelers in a polluted atmosphere when they can afford cars or things like that. So essentially just showcasing their poverty, showing off their poverty, or showing off their richness. Neither of it is good, just for the heck of it. What is more important is to compete with yourself, being better today than what you are yesterday, being better tomorrow than what you are today. We talked about this in a little more detail earlier. So let's move on. So that's Atri Maharishi, associated with Anusuya Devi and associated with Dattatreya, one of the most wonderful gurus, my favorite guru in fact. And then we move on to the Manipura Chakra. At the Manipura Chakra, we have Bharadwaja Maharishi, who is responsible for the concept of Annadhana, or the donation of food. It's said that amongst all donations, the donation of food is the best, because especially to a hungry person. But that hunger need not be hunger for the edible food. It can be hunger for knowledge, as wisdom as well. So satisfying the hunger of not only the body but also the mind and the intellect is considered the greatest donation that you could ever give. And that Bharadwaja Maharishi, who constituted this concept of Annadhana, both of food for body and food for mind and intellect, is over here, along with his wonderful wife Sushila. Again, Su means good and Sheila means purity. Cleanliness and purity, hygiene, all these things go with it. Obviously, all those things are required with food, right? And all kinds of food, both not only for the body but the mind and intellect as well. You need to take clean food. Now, he's also responsible, by the way, for Ayurveda, about which I talked in the end of the previous episode. So that form of holistic medicine, which treats a human being as a whole, made of all these 5 entities, also associated with Dhanvantari Maharishi, who is the avatar of Vishnu himself. So Bharadwaja, Dhanvantari, these are all associated concepts. But essentially, using food itself as a medicine to keep your health in a well-being, prevention better than cure, rather than having to take medicine later on. But for those who are already into such a situation, thanks to their own karmic actions, thoughts and words, now they have to, if they are in emergency situations, they need to take certain medicines. And Bharadwaja Maharishi was so kind that not only did he do Annadhanam of food, but also of medicines for those who are in a precarious condition, emergency condition like that. So that's as far as the Manipura Chakra is concerned. We move further up to the Anahata Chakra, which is the chakra of my own Gotrakaraka, Vishwamitra Maharishi, and his Gotrakaraka, Kaushiki. So Vishwamitra Maharishi, one of the saptarśīs, resides here with his spouse Kumudavati Tayar, and of course to tempt him the Rajasic gunas, because once you transcend Bharadwaja, you are into a sattvic space, right? So you have transcended the Rajasic space of passion action, and you have gone into purity where you are in a much more still kind of meditative state, and obviously they're going to try and trouble you, right? So Vishwamitra was tried by the Devas